My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. There's really no film quite like The Blues Brothers. I don't know that there's many comedies that are that lengthy and have that many quotable moments. But I don't know that there's many comedies that have that many great musical numbers. I don't know that there's many films that you could almost call a musical just as well as a comedy, just as much as an action film, and have more car chases than most action films. Such is the case with The Blues Brothers. The Blues Brothers is a film that has not only spawned at least one sequel, but Super Bowl halftime shows, live stage shows, all sorts of other things. I am not sure in the annals of American comedy history over the course of the last 50 years at least that we've seen anything like it, which is one of the reasons I was so pleased to pick up the book The Blues Brothers, an epic friendship, the rise of improv, and the making of an American film classic. I expected to read a book about the film, how interesting it was, how good it was, and maybe some stuff about the behind-the-scenes making of the film. And there was some stuff of that in there, a lot of it actually. But it really delves into so much more. The relationship between Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, the incredible time in American comedies that the late 70s, early 80s was, and it's all chronicled in this book, The Blues Brothers, by best-selling author and journalist extraordinaire Daniel Vise. Daniel, thanks so much for joining me on the radio.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Daniel, you've written about a lot of things. You've written about some serious stuff, some not so serious stuff. You're a very accomplished journalist. Of all the things to write about, why the Blues Brothers?
Well, it's a good question. You know, I'm from Chicago, and I'd always wanted to do some kind of Chicago book, and this is my fifth book. So I don't know if that was maybe in the back of my mind, but I was finishing up a biography of the great B.B. King. And because I was doing B.B. King, I had occasion to talk to John Landis. I wanted to know why B.B. King wasn't in the Blues Brothers. And so, why would the King of the Blues not be in the Blues Brothers? So I tracked down John Landis, and I was talking to him. And he's quite a talker, and we were talking. And so it sort of, we start talking about the Blues Brothers, and I got more and more interested in the film. And then when Landis told me there was like a real kind of secret mission from God that was different from the mission from God that was in the movie, I was sort of hooked. And I said, well, has anybody done a book, about the Blues Brothers? And it's Chicago, and I'm from Chicago. The film meant a great deal to me. And I guess it kind of went from there into a book.
There are so many incredible moments in this film, so many great lines, so many lines that make you laugh. There are so many lines that I don't think would be as fun or as funny without the deadpan delivery of Belushi and Aykroyd.
It's 106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
But there are a lot of films. Obviously, a lot of folks are aware of both Aykroyd and Belushi from their time on Saturday Night Live. There are a lot of films that start out as SNL sketches and then become films. Wayne's World, for example, which was a great film. Stuart Smalley, which was not such a great film. The Coneheads, which was maybe something in between, and A Night at the Roxbury, or even A Night at the Roxbury, which has its fans. Just for history's sake, or if people don't remember, did the Blues Brothers start out as an SNL sketch, or did it start out as a film?
Well, the Blues Brothers movie has tons of fans overseas in Britain, Italy, Germany, Australia. And, they all think, not every last one of them, but most of them think that the characters were created for the film, that the film just came out of the blue sky. But as anyone of a certain age knows, the Blues Brothers started out as a sketch and a musical act on SNL. In fact, Belushi and Aykroyd first kind of sang the blues together on the first season of Saturday Night Live. So this would be 75, 76. They didn't have the get-up yet with the funeral suits and all that, but they were singing the blues. And this was something they already were doing together. And then they kind of created the characters in season 3 and trotted them out for the first time in arguably the greatest episode, I would say, ever of SNL, certainly from the first cast, which is the Steve Martin King Tut episode. And that was the first time that the Blues Brothers, the characters, appeared on SNL, and it went from there.
I'm a soul man. I'm a soul man. I'm a soul man. I'm a soul man. Ha! Got what?
Tell me a bit about the relationship between Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. Clearly, they were very close. How did they first meet? What did they first work together on? What can you tell folks about the depths of their relationship?
Yeah, and just to start, the reason I love this idea for a book is it's a dual biography. It's about their friendship, right? And I had done one of those books before. I'd done a dual biography of Andy Griffith
and Don Knotts, right?
And Don Knotts, yeah, because Don was my brother-in-law. So I loved that idea. So Belushi and Aykroyd, they met in Toronto, which is where Aykroyd was from. Belushi went to Toronto on kind of a scouting expedition looking for talent. Belushi at that point was working with Second City. Sorry, he'd gone from Second City, and he was working for National Lampoon. Aykroyd was still with Second City, but up in Toronto, which was their satellite operation. So Belushi was looking for talent for National Lampoon, and he went up to Toronto, and I think he was especially interested in Gilda Radner, who was in the Toronto company of Second City, and he was interested in this guy named Aykroyd, who was kind of a pistol, this firecracker young guy. So they met, and I believe this was in 1974. It's in my book. And they just hit it off instantly. And Aykroyd, who was all of like 21 or 22 years old, operated a speakeasy because the bars all closed kind of early in Toronto. And so he had this sort of illegal after-hours beer joint. And they hung out there and just became fast friends. And that's kind of how they met. But they had really similar backgrounds. Both of them had come up through Second City, Belushi in Chicago, Aykroyd in Canada.
If people are just tuning in, this is The Other Side of Midnight at 30 minutes after the hour. I'm Frank Morano. My guest is the one and only Daniel Divise. His book is The Blues Brothers, an epic friendship, the rise of improv, and the making of an American film classic. Daniel, how would you compare the relationship of, since you study both of these friendships closely, between Aykroyd and Belushi as compared to the one that you researched with Andy Griffith and Don Knotts?
That's a good question, and no one's asked me that before.
We ask the tough questions here.
So Andy Griffith and Don Knotts had what I would call a Hollywood friendship, in as much as they spent like every waking hour together for 5 years, from 1960 to 1965, doing the Griffith Show. And they were together constantly. Like, they were more with each other than they were with their spouses, basically. And so it was a really intense bond that they formed. And I would say that for the whole rest of their lives, they didn't see each other all that much, in the subsequent 30, 40 years. But they had this intense closeness because of all that time they'd spent together. Kind of like the experience, I guess, if you're in college with somebody, living in the dorm and with them every day, all day. And so with Belushi and Aykroyd, it's a little different because their friendship was cut short when Belushi died. But I would say it was a similar thing, also kind of a quote-unquote Hollywood friendship, except in their case, this intense relationship played out behind the scenes at Saturday Night Live, because they were there like 24/7, 7 days a week when they were making the show, and just always together. They shared an office. I'm sure they saw each other more than they saw, Judy Belushi, which is John's girlfriend, later wife, and Aykroyd, whoever he was dating. So it was a very intense friendship, but that friendship was cut short because Belushi died, I don't know, less than 10 years after they'd met. So we never got to see what their friendship would look like when they reached their sort of autumn years.
Here at the Almond Joy Factory, where tropical vibes abound, we use soft, fresh-tasting coconut.
The crunchiest almonds and delicious chocolate candy.
Ah, but do you know what our most important ingredient is? Sometimes you feel like a nut.
Sometimes you don't.
Almond Joy's got nuts and something even way better than that. Yes, Almond Joy is made with almonds and joy.
How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge. This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself, to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
This episode is brought to you by GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco. Get the most out of your vehicle with GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco original equipment. The only parts designed, engineered, tested, and backed by General Motors. You can find your perfect fit for most makes and models and choose from 3 tiers of parts, including GM OE or gold and silver aftermarket parts. Visit gmparts.com for more information.
And what a shame that is, and we'll come back to Belushi's untimely death in just a minute. You mentioned the fact that there's a lot of great guest stars in the movie. Unfortunately, B.B. King isn't one. Who's your favorite guest star that's in the movie?
Oh, it changes every time I see it, and that speaks to the strength of the musical numbers. They're also different, and they're also good. The one that got the most write-ups when the film came out was Aretha. In fact, a lot of the critics hated the film and panned it, which is funny to think now. But everyone loved the Aretha scene. So, that's objectively maybe the greatest scene when she does think.
You better think about what you're saying. You better think about the consequences of your actions.
Oh, shut up, woman.
You better think about what you're trying to do to me. Yeah, think. Let your mind go, let yourself be free.
But on a lot of days, if I watch the movie or just dial up a scene on YouTube, I love the Ray Charles number, which is like a Robert Crumb sort of cartoon, come to life. I say that in the book.
Excuse me, I don't think there's anything wrong with the action on this piano. Well, I heard about the fella you've been dancing with all over the neighborhood. So why didn't you ask me, baby? Or didn't you think I could? Well, I know that the Boogaloo is out of sight.
I love the John Lee Hooker scene on Maxwell Street. I used to go to Maxwell Street. It existed when I was young. I bought an Al Green record there on Maxwell Street. Dude pulled a gun on me just to show me that he had a gun. I don't know why he was showing me he had a gun, but that was real. That stuff actually happened on Maxwell Street, and there was good music there.
Boom, 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 boom. How, 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 how. Hey, hey. Come on home, babe. Oh, come on home.
But yeah, I mean, Aretha is kind of the classic scene, and she was. I mean, that's why the movie is so iconic. Is because of the presence of Ray Charles and Aretha and their peers. That's what makes it a timeless, immortal film. So, I mean, I think they're the important ones, and she's my single favorite of all. But you got to love all the cameos, like Spielberg.
I was going to ask you about
Spielberg.
that one as well. A pretty important role. I don't think there's much dialogue. I don't think there's any dialogue in his scene there. But by the way, if folks are just tuning in, this is The Other Side of Midnight. We're talking with Daniel Divise. He's the author of the book, The Blues Brothers. Daniel, you mentioned your being from Chicago, and obviously Chicago is a big part of this film. We're being heard right now in Chicago on WGN, one of the great radio stations in the country, and certainly a station with a great history in Chicago. Is this the perfect Chicago movie? Is there a better Chicago movie than this one?
First of all, WGN, for those who don't know, stands for World's Greatest Newspaper.
Absolutely.
Which is what the Tribune billed itself as back in the day. And I used to watch and listen to WGN all the time. And WLS is world's largest store, FYI. It used to be Sears.
Yeah, we're not as excited about that station.
WGN was my fave when I was a kid. So the question is Blues Brothers the greatest Chicago film? There's a theory which I wish I could take credit for. It's that, again, if you're of a certain age, if you're from the city, which I was, actually grew up in the city, or you're poor, then the Blues Brothers is your film. If you're from the suburbs, like John Hughes was, the film director, or if you're kind of rich and you hang out on the Gold Coast, then it's Ferris Bueller. And older people who are from, especially, dudes, it's either Ferris Bueller or it's the Blues Brothers, one or the other.
John Belushi, while he's known as a great comedic talent and a very good actor, as is clear in this film, and for people that saw the John Belushi documentary that came out a year or two ago, it's very clear in watching that, he's actually a very skilled musician, isn't he?
Belushi and Aykroyd both had a great passion as musicians, and Aykroyd in particular had a great depth of musical knowledge. He knew all of the old blues stuff. Belushi was a wonderful showman, and so I think to fully appreciate the Blues Brothers, you'd have had to either see them, as I did, performing on SNL, or see them in person when they toured the country, because they actually got a real band and actually toured. And so if you saw Belushi, and you could watch him, then you got what a great showman he was and what a great frontman he was. Now, objectively, Belushi's vocals, I mean, he's good. He's a good singer. I don't think he holds a candle to the people whose songs he was singing, like Sam and Dave, but he's great. He was a great singer, but more of a passionate kind of what would I mean, he's not a professional, but he was a professional. He wasn't a professional singer. He was a professional performer, and he had such charisma that I think this is why they got exultant reviews almost everywhere they went. People would just be blown away once they saw Belushi do his thing. So it was not just his voice, which was good, right? It was the whole package. That's what would make people so enthused to see them perform.
Maybe I'm taking for granted that the whole audience is familiar with the Blues Brothers and has seen the film. The film is 44 years old, and maybe if people haven't seen it, they haven't seen it. Explain the appeal of this motion picture to somebody that has not seen it. What makes it so great?
Oh, well, it's an old film. My son was just the other day was chiding me for trying to show him a film that was more than 15 years old. So this is a really old film. Hey, at least it's in color, right? But for younger people, I mean, it's a classic. It's a classic Chicago film. It's a classic rhythm and blues and music film. It's a musical, but it's also kind of like hip and kind of modern. And I mean, it's not a musical like, you know, one of the ones Judy Garland was in or something. I think the reason it's so important and so like still relevant now is that it's this incredible like artifact of some of the greatest musical talents from the whole last 50, 60, 70 years. I mean, there's no bigger, more important musical talents than Aretha, Ray Charles, James Brown, and they're all there. And oddly enough, if you go to like YouTube, I mean, there's no single better source of just if you want to see what Aretha was all about and you have 5 minutes to spare, you could do a lot worse than watching the scene from this movie. So, I mean, and this is why the film has such an enormous international appeal. This book that I did, it's got German edition, Spanish language edition for Latin America, Italian edition. There's another one that I'm going to forget. Yeah, German. Oh, and then UK, and which encompasses also Canada, Australia, I believe. And all these people all over the world. I mean, they didn't watch SNL. They weren't familiar with Saturday Night Live. They just love, I think, these characters, and they love these wonderful musical artists. But the other thing, and you said this in the intro to this segment, I think that Blues Brothers characters are kind of an archetype, and so that also gives the film some relevance today. That these characters are sort of they're a pair of great characters from history, and it's quite right that they're still popular because they're just great characters. I don't know that the film will ever really grow old. I mean, it's just a terrific concept for a movie. And again, I can't stress enough that people outside the United States aren't even aware that it was ever on at Saturday Night Live. They just like the characters and the film, right, as a one-off thing.
This film was as you mentioned, was not exactly praised by critics. How did it do at the box office?
It did very well. It earned about $1 million a day, which was a really good pace. That was considered a blockbuster pace. John Landis explained this to me. They had ads they took out in Variety with the two little characters dancing, and it would say, like, you know, $23 million, 22 days, you know, and then like $35 million, 34 days. It was doing $1 million a day. It was the second or third biggest grossing film of the year. I think Empire Strikes Back might have come out the same year, so it didn't beat that one, but it did very, very well. But I cannot stress enough that the reviews were terrible. It was panned in almost every major publication, and these were multi-million circulation publications. If I remember correctly, you know, the New York Times, Time Magazine, you know, New York Magazine, probably Newsweek, Washington Post, LA Times, all pretty much hated it. The only really good reviews that I can remember, and I quote them in the book, were from Chicago, because the Chicago journalists had a soft spot because it was a wonderful Chicago film. So Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, I think this was before sneak previews, but they gave it 2 thumbs up, basically. They both liked the film.
There's so much I could ask you about the film, but in terms of what this did to the careers of the two stars, John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, what did it do? What did it mean to their careers?
Well, I'll answer that question kind of in backwards, because Belushi had become a huge star on the strength of Animal House, right?
Mm-hmm.
Animal House was a huge breakout hit. It was the big National Lampoon film, and it was a massive success. And Belushi was the star of that film. He wound up on the cover of like Newsweek, which again had like 2 million circulation at the time. It was a big deal. So there was going to be another Belushi movie. It was just a question of what. They would have made a film of him reading the phone book. I mean, it could have been anything. And as it happened, he and Aykroyd were interested in the Blues Brothers, so that's why that became the next Belushi film. Now, Blues Brothers, of course, did very well, too. And at that point, Belushi could have literally just done anything. I mean, they would have filmed him standing in a phone booth or anything at all. And so there were a whole bunch of different ideas, and you have to be kind of a pretty knowledgeable person to even know what Belushi did next, because the Blues Brothers was the last huge smash that Belushi was involved in. After that, he and Aykroyd made Neighbors, right? Which was kind of a weird, quirky film where they played kind of opposites to type. I think Belushi plays kind of the sane one, and Aykroyd plays kind of the crazy one. And then, not long after that, Belushi died. And then Aykroyd, as you and I both know, went on to enormous success with Ghostbusters, which is Aykroyd's other genius script that he wrote. He wrote the Blues Brothers script, and he wrote the Ghostbusters script, and those are amazing scripts, and he wrote them just out of his brain, basically, both of them.
And I could talk with you all day about this stuff, and I hope you come back, but before Belushi died, was there plans for a sequel for the Blues Brothers? Obviously, I know there was one 20 years later, but was there plans for a more, a speedier sequel than the one that happened 2 decades later?
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to say that in the period of time after the Blues Brothers came out, first of all, the boys took some time off. They were out in like Martha's Vineyard, just kind of soaking up sun and relaxing. They wanted to both make movies separate from each other, just to prove their chops on their own, and they both did. I'm trying to remember which movies these were, but I think Aykroyd made like Dr. Detroit, which wasn't very good, and Belushi, I'm going to forget what movie. He made a couple of movies where he played kind of like a leading man. But so they were off doing their own thing. There was a lot of talk about different movies that one or the other of them was going to be in. One of the movies they were talking about doing was the movie that became Ghostbusters, right? Mm-hmm. There was going to be a movie about Abscam that I think Louis Malle was going to direct, believe it or not. And a bunch of other ideas. But no, to answer your question, Belushi went off the rails and died before anything like a sequel would have happened. And I think in the book I may have an even better answer specifically of why, because I asked Sean Daniel, the Universal executive, why there wasn't immediately a sequel, and I'm not sure that I can remember the answer to that. But basically, it was that they had all these other projects they wanted to do first. They were firing off in all different directions at that time in their lives. They were these young guys and just doing everything under the sun. There was a lot of projects going on.
Let me end with this because, again, it's a terrific book. I hope people check it out. By the way, what did you think of the sequel, Blues Brothers 2000? It did not do well, and it's one of those films that I don't think many people regard as a classic, but I only saw it once, but I thought it had a certain charm. What did you think?
I was maybe a little dismissive of it in my book, and I feel a little bad about that because it's not a bad film, but it's not a legendary classic either, right? And John Landis mailed me the soundtrack to it, and I think he did that because he wanted to show me that the film is important, if only for this great soundtrack, and I was very grateful to get that from him in the mail. It's got a great soundtrack. You can't deny that, and it's not a bad film, but but Landis would, again, the director Landis would tell you there were some concessions made, probably to the studio when that film was made. So he wasn't able to make it probably the way he would have wanted to make it. It might have been a better film had he been allowed to do that.
The Vatican called the Blues Brothers a Catholic classic. How many films get hated by Roger Ebert and canonized by the church in the same lifetime?
Well, it is a spiritual film. Aykroyd in particular had a very religious upbringing. He was basically in priest school for a while and had a lot of memories of kind of a Catholic upbringing. Let me think. Belushi, I'm trying to remember, was involved in the Albanian church, I believe, but wasn't as religious as Aykroyd. No, it is a spiritual film. I mean, it is suffused with spiritualism. And again, I have to come back to this mission from God. I mean, the mission from God in the film, of course, is to raise this money for the orphanage. But in real life, behind the scenes, there was a real mission from God, and I think Aykroyd felt that God had commanded him to do what he could, what Dan Aykroyd could, to help the careers of his idols, these wonderful rhythm and blues icons, and that's what he did, and that's what Belushi and Landis did. So it's a beautiful thing, this film. I mean, it's these dudes who were very famous and could do anything, they chose to shine a light on these great rhythm and blues artists and celebrate them, and we're still celebrating them 45 years later.
Well said. Favorite line in the film? You have to pick one. What is it?
People always ask me this, and I always blow it. Favorite line in the Blues Brothers? I really like all the deadpan stuff between Jake and Elwood. What's one? Oh, I love the speech that Aykroyd gives, the gearhead speech about the car when he's trying to convince Belushi, when he's trying to convince Jake that it's a worthy car. It's got cop suspension, cop struts, and it's just like, fix a cigarette lighter. I love that line.
That is a good one. Daniel Dibizet, the book is terrific. It's called The Blues Brothers, An Epic Friendship, The Rise of Improv, and the Making of an American Film Classic. Best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
If you want to comment on any portion of our conversation, you can give me a call. Our phone number, 646-720-0635. That's 1-646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.